now is basically Ecology, the new diplomatic frontier for cross border action. So let me give you a few words about the theme and then we'll start the session with our honorable dignitaries. Exploring a financial method to evaluate the cost of natural capital and the creation of ecological budgets can help these countries that are rich in biodiversity envision a management strategy for their finite, non renewable resources. Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz notes that a private company is judged by both its income and balance sheet. But most countries only compile an income statement based on GDP and have very little awareness about the stock side of the equation in the national balance sheet. More and more countries and organizations are recognizing that economic profitability is not the only thing that matters, as seen in the COP26 Glasgow Climate Pact, as well as the World Bank's Global Program on Sustainability, which integrates environmental sustainability into public and private decisions by providing high quality data, analytical tools, and technical assistance of measuring and valuing natural capital and ecosystem services. While both the public and private sectors would gain from the meaningful valuation of natural assets, ecological budgets empower governments to account for the role of nature in the economy and human well being. It enables businesses to become more efficient and sustainable and to minimize risks, as well as small farm holders and communities to make smarter decisions that generate financial value and responsibility of standing natural assets. The issue of natural capital debt has largely been ignored, where it is essential to measure the cost of nature, including directly in decision making as an evaluation of business assets against the model of extractive commodification of nature. So, with those few words, I would like to start this particular session. But before that, let me ask our tech team to play a video from Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen, our Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bangladesh. Thank you.
Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Mr. Chair, distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. It gives me immense pleasure to address this session on ecology, the new diplomatic frontier for cross-border action under the auspices of the 10th Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum. I thank the Balipara Foundation and the Independent University of Bangladesh for organizing this multi-stakeholder forum for the first time in Dhaka. This is the kind of people-to-people contact that we value in our exemplary bilateral relations with India. I also thank the organizers for recognizing Bangladesh's potentials for spearheading diplomatic efforts on the interface between climate and biodiversity in the eastern Himalayan region. The shared ecology and corresponding challenges in the region can indeed transcend national borders and political divergences and create an avenue for the countries in the region to come together for meaningful collective actions. Distinguished participants, our world is going through a series of multiplied impacts induced by the climate change. Our exploitation of natural resources has severely impacted the lives and livelihoods of billions. The climate-related disasters are incurring a huge toll of around $200 billion annually. The cost will rise to $23 trillion by the year 2050, as suggested by various researchers. With the Himalayan glaciers melting at an accelerated pace, there are increased instances of floods and tropical storms in this region, making it one of the most disaster prone regions in the world. The frequency of tropical cyclones in the North Indian Ocean is 7% of the global total, and their impact on the countries bordering the northern Bay of Bengal can be extremely dangerous. Ocean heating, regular cyclone formation destroys feeding, breeding, and nursery ground for fishes and other commercially important species. On the other hand, the sea level rise in the Bay of Bengal and its multiple after effects have direct consequence of mass movement of climate migrants with security implications for the region, both internal and external and beyond. The World Bank's Ground Cell Report 2021 estimates that salinity, rising sea levels, and other impacts of climate change in Bangladesh may drive around 13.3 million climate migrants from their usual habitats by 2050. As it is, according to one estimate, every year 650,000 people of Bangladesh are being uprooted from their homes, from their sweet homes and traditional jobs, and are rendered climate migrants. Over the last few decades, a large number of wildlife species has gone extinct, and more are likely to face the same consequences. The Living Planet Report 2020 of the Worldwide Fund for Nature revealed that, on average, two-thirds of wildlife population had declined since 1970. The eastern Himalayan countries, from the snow line to the sea line, as coined by the organizers, have become a global hotspot for such irredeemable losses. It is imperative to place ecology at the fulcrum of national, regional, and global policies to combat growing threats to the world's food, water, and survival systems. The nexus between ecology and economics must be the basis of the paradigm shift aimed at by nature economics. The local communities themselves should continue to act as the principal stewards of the ecology and environment impacting their lives. Their efforts across national borders can be strengthened and accelerated through a fresh approach to economic diplomacy. Bangladesh would be a willing partner to join and steer such diplomatic efforts in our regional context. Distinguished participants, Bangladesh's commitment to ecology and biodiversity protection has remained a constant in our state policy, despite our resource constraints and high population density. Our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, had enacted the Wildlife Preservation Order as early as 1973. Following his lead, the government of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina facilitated the insertion of Article 18A in our Constitution, which stipulates that, and I quote, the state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and to preserve and safeguard natural resources, biodiversity, wetlands, forest, and wildlife for the present and future citizens, unquote. Pursuant to our constitutional mandate and international obligation flowing from the Convention on Biological Diversity 1972, our national parliament enacted the Bangladesh Biological Diversity Act 2017 through public consultations. Our government has already designated more than 5% of total terrestrial area as ecologically critical areas and about 5% of the maritime zone as marine protected areas. We remain open to making efforts towards enlisting some additional wetlands or water bodies in the country under the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands 1971. In a similar vein, Bangladesh joined the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, an initiative to reverse biodiversity loss by 2030 for sustainable development during the United Nations Summit on Biodiversity in September 2020. We also joined Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forest and Land Use during COP26 in Glasgow last year. Subsequently, we aligned ourselves with the 30 by 30 initiative to preserve 30% of global land space, and oceans by 2030. In parallel, we have joined the Global Methane Pledge to throw our support behind curbing global greenhouse gas emission. We'll certainly be pleased to see other countries in the Eastern Himalayan region join such forward-looking initiatives in the interest of our shared ecology and biodiversity. Likewise, Bangladesh stands ready to work together with other regional countries to combat the growing menace of wildlife trafficking. We are the relevant UN organizations to support sustained regional level dialogues and joint initiatives in this regard. Our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had joined the first ever World Tiger Summit back in 2010 in St. Petersburg in the Russian Federation. The commitment she had made at this summit contributed to our joint work with India in increasing the number of tigers in the Sundarbans. Our government remains pledge-bound to our citizens to safeguard the critical ecosystem of the Sundarbans, a UNESCO World Natural Heritage Site, at any cost. It may be relevant here to mention that we have featured the Sundarbans in the next calendar to be published by my ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2023, which is also a testimony to the importance we attach to this world's largest mangrove forest in our foreign policy pursuits. As you are all aware, Bangladesh is now hosting nearly 1.2 million forcibly displaced Rohingyas from Myanmar, especially in the ecologically critical areas of Cox's Bazar. Due to the massive influx of Rohingya from August 2017, there has been a severe disruption of the elephant trail in the impacted areas. The prolonged Rohingya presence has also taken a heavy toll on the local environment, resulting in loss of forest coverage and occasional mudslides in the low elevated hilly terrain. The safe and dignified repatriation of the Rohingya to their homes in Myanmar's Rakhine state is of paramount importance, not only for restoring their legitimate status as Myanmar citizens, but also for preserving the endangered ecosystems in the affected areas that are integrated with the ecology of the Eastern Himalaya region. Even after the anticipated repatriation of Rohingya, it would take Bangladesh some considerable efforts and time to restore and rewild the impacted areas. In some other parts of Bangladesh, the lives and livelihoods of people are crucially dependent on the flow of certain transboundary rivers. A sound water sharing mechanism in these rivers is vital for the sustainable living and overall ecology of the concerned areas. In order to achieve durable solutions in this context, Bangladesh has been advocating for a basin-wide approach to water management anchored in scientific evidence and data. In the sub-regional context, we also urge the need for collaboration among the countries concerned to further improve our flood prediction system, including through sharing of data. We are pleased that following a hiatus, Bangladesh and India held a meeting of the Joint River Commission in September this year. Bangladesh remains actively engaged with the ongoing UN-sponsored negotiations on the high seas areas beyond national jurisdictions and on combating plastic pollution. As the current chair of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, we attach special importance to protecting the marine ecosystems that should be the cornerstones of our shared pursuit of a sustainable and inclusive blue economy. We believe that countries in the eastern Himalayan region can play an instrumental role in this connection. As the world's largest delta, Bangladesh remains particularly sensitized to the ecological characteristics of the deltaic terrain with added implications for our diplomatic efforts. Our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has personally led the efforts to formulate the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100 to help realize her vision of a resilient and prosperous delta. During COP27 in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt last month, we joined the Dutch initiative to form a champions group on deltas and coastal areas and signaled our principal support for the international panel on deltas and coastal areas to be launching during the UN Water Conference in March 2023. In addition, Bangladesh maintains its standing offer to host the Secretariat of the International Delta Coalition in Dhaka. We have this year joined the call for the UN Secretary General to appoint a special envoy on water. Our recently launched National Adaptation Plan encompasses 8 sectors where priority actions have been outlined for protecting our ecosystems, biodiversity, deltas, and coastal zones. Just the day before yesterday, our Honorable Prime Minister launched the Global Hub on locally led adaptation in Dhaka under the aegis of the Global Center on Adaptation. This hub will allow us to share our homegrown experiences with water-related climate adaptation actions like floating agriculture, flood and cyclone shelters, flood-tolerant crops varieties, etc. Distinguished participants, we hope that the UN Biodiversity Conference, that is COP15, that is being held in Montreal, Canada, at the moment, will culminate in a game-changing, comprehensive plan to address biodiversity loss to concern international action. We used to see a balanced outcome from COP15 with primacy given to supporting developing and least developed countries with adequate financing and technologies to step up their efforts in biodiversity protection. Amidst the current geopolitical tension, the combined efforts and solidarity of international community would remain critical to save our planet and to secure its diverse ecosystem for our future generations. There is no alternative to constructive and innovative diplomacy towards navigating the challenges we countenance for our biodiversity and sustainable development. The countries in the eastern Himalayan region can take a lead on that by mobilizing the necessary political will for charting a new pathway for people-centered cross-border actions. I thank you all. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Dr. Abdul Momen, sir, for his brilliant and intriguing message for all of us. At this point, I would like to request Professor Dr. Imtiaz A. Hussain, the Executive Director, Center for Pedagogy at Independent University, Bangladesh, who will also be chairing this particular session. So, sir, I would like to invite you at the stage, please. Thank you. I would also like to invite Ambassador Mashfi Shams, Secretary East, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Bangladesh. Madam, a round of applause for all of them. And then we have Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, sir, Senior Visiting Fellow, Center for Policy Research, India. I would like to invite all of you to come up on stage and take your seats. Thank you. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to humbly request Professor Imtiaz A. Hussain to moderate this session for all of us. Thank you, sir. The tech guys, please start with the presentation. Sir, the presentation is on.
My greetings, salam, namaste, and good morning to all of you on behalf of Independent University Bangladesh, the Center for Bay of Bengal Studies, and the Global Studies and Governance Department. I think Ambassador Tariq introduced the most strategic variable in this conference, and that is the ecology. And it's not the state, it's not any other organization. And he does that to express, I think, the heart, mind, and the soul of the Balipara Foundation, and especially their Naturenomics Forum. And I would like to welcome all of you. You've done a splendid job and for 3 days, and I'd like to congratulate you and welcome you, and also thank you for picking one of the top issues of the day, giving ecology the priority you have. We are very pleased to have with us, you have already heard our Honorable Foreign Minister, and in a way, he has taken over many of the issues that I had listed to throw at our speakers. And that's good, because I, as a citizen, am really on the same page as the highest foreign policy speaker of the country. And that is the kind of ecological amalgamation that we need across the many boundaries. But without much ado, I do want to mention a couple other issues. Before that, also introduce our two guest speakers here. Let me begin with Her Excellency Ambassador Mashfi bint Shams. She has been here a couple of times before, maybe in this month. And I'm just wondering, Ambassador Tariq, can we make it a hat trick before the year is over? I would also like to introduce to you former Ambassador, His Excellency Mr. Gautam Mukhopadhyay, and he was the former ambassador from representing the Ministry of External Affairs in India. We will hear from both of them in that order in just a minute. I want to introduce to you a couple of other issues. As a citizen, why this is important to me. I've done that. But the two biggest issues of this year, 2022, might be predicting a third major concern uh, later for us, all of us. The first, of course, is the flooding that we had in Sylhet and Sunamganj from as early as May this year. And that's a very early time to have floods. And it was not just rain falling in Sylhet, a lot of it was coming from Assam, which also had huge flooding problems. And so this is something we must keep in mind why it was happening and how we prepare for it next time. Because I think the next time will come many, many more times. The other thing is on the other border we have, on the western side, I was visiting Rajshahi, and I was looking at the Ganges from Sarda police station, which is right on the border. From there, where the Ganges used to be, now there is cattle pasture land. Farther east, you will find restaurants. That means the water has dipped so much, which means it is also sucking in saline water from the bay. So these are two major concerns. Predicting a third one, this is the hypothetical one coming from the most unusual event of the year, flooding in Pakistan. And because of glaciers melting up north in the Himalayas. If we look at Colombo and look straight up Colombo, we see the mouth of 3, 4 rivers. It's not just the Indus, but also the Ganges and even the Brahmaputra coming to the east here. And therefore, if the glaciers are melting there and taking zigzagging patterns all the way to the ocean, maybe we could be next. And therefore, what can we learn? This is basically the two messages. And the interesting part about the 5 issues I was going to throw out at our guests, a lot of them have been touched by the foreign minister. His Honorable Dr. Abdul Momen, he basically touched all of them. The one that he did is at the top, the one where I put a smile, and that is the cross-border hearts that we have. These were created basically to help indigenous people. And it is from them that we learn about ecology, because they know what to consume and how to throw things. And this is something awfully important in our battle against the climate. And it's completely in contrast with the second issue there, which is the normal routine trade we have, the international checkposts that we have in India, Bangladesh. They're filled with cars, trucks wanting to cross, waiting with their engine on. And so there's a lot of gas coming out just from waiting. And then when people go, why do they cross the border? To collect material, shopping. And what do they come back with? It's mostly, and what do they go with from here? It's mostly plastic bags. And so, can we do something at the border, my distinguished guest? Is there something that we can do policy making wise to stop that at the border? We could go a long way to control the plastic pollution of the country. The third, fourth, and fifth issues have been very well touched and explained by our honorable foreign minister. And with these, I think, I have laid out a few issues of cross-border problems that we must address. And I'd like to basically go to our guests and see what we can learn from them in this session today. Thank you very much. Can I first introduce, request Her Excellency, the Ambassador Mashife Binte Shams, please. If you like, you can even speak from the chair. Please.
Thank you. I have bad eyesight, so I need to be guided around. Um, Thank you, distinguished chairperson of this session, Dr. Imtiaz Hussain, distinguished fellow panelists, distinguished audience. Good morning, Assalamu alaikum, namaste. Let me begin by saying how honored and delighted I am to join you all here with this, the 10th edition of this forum organized by the Balipara Foundation on a very critical issue that that should be discussed by all the countries of the region, especially the Eastern Himalayan countries. And a lot of discussion has already taken place, and I would like to thank Balipara Foundation and IUB and Ambassador Tariq Karim for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. Discussing the ecology and economics of the Eastern Himalayan region makes me wonder, actually, because the countries that comprise Eastern Himalayas, Nepal, Bhutan, Eastern India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Southern China, by extension, if you extend a little bit to the east, Thailand. So all these countries are geographically contiguous. They are intertwined ecologically and so much interdependent. This region is one of the most diverse regions of the world. They are home to the highest peaks in the world, as well as the largest bay and the largest delta. They are also home to 3 of the world's major river systems, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Meghna. The region is also home to some of the most biodiversity hotspots. The Brahmaputra-Salween region has been identified by ICIMOD, the Integrated Center for Integrated Mountain Development, as a biodiversity hotspot. It constitutes mainly Bhutan, parts of Bhutan, parts of Northeast India, and part of Myanmar. By extension, it should also include northern Bangladesh. So we hope that that study will be included, and Bangladesh will be included in that study. This region is home to the largest number of people living below the poverty line, and yet it is also one of the world's most fastest growing economies. It hosts the world's fastest growing economies. So it's a region with a lot of contradictions and dichotomy, and collaborating, because we are historically linked, because we have a lot of historical baggage. Collaboration and cooperation sometimes becomes challenging for diplomats, and challenging for all of us, even when we realize that it makes more sense to collaborate than to create borders or boundaries or barriers. So when we talk of ecology and the environment and the economics of it, indeed, with the growing challenges of climate change and global warming, the importance of collaboration within the region cannot be underestimated or cannot be overestimated. When the Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan are 3 countries, we are members of the CVF, the Climate Vulnerable Forum, and it's a coalition of 50 plus most vulnerable countries in the world, where Bangladesh has been identified to be the 7th most vulnerable country. As mentioned by our Honorable Foreign Minister, there are many areas where Bangladesh is collaborating bilaterally, regionally, and also multilaterally with the countries of the region for promoting, protecting, ecology, the environment, and our biodiversity. For example, with India, we have several mechanisms in place already. We have 2 MOUs, one for the protection of and conservation of the Sundarbans, which the 2 countries share, the largest mangrove forest in the world, and also for the protection of tigers, which were signed in 2011. We also have an MOU for conservation of elephants. Unfortunately, the collaboration under these MOUs is not as robust as it should be, because the ministries always have some more pressing issues to discuss or pressing issues to take care of. And so collaboration under this MOU is not that much as robust, and we have not met for a long time. But it is imperative that we get down together to work for the preservation and conservation of this very fragile ecosystem. Similarly, Nepal contributes almost through the Ganges. It contributes almost 30% to the waters to the water systems, river systems of Bangladesh. During the winter season. And as mentioned, the Ganges the health of the Ganges is critically important to the western and the southwestern districts of Bangladesh, not only for the water flow, but also to prevent the salinity intrusion. Bangladesh, we have been working with India for promoting riverine connectivity. Bangladesh and India are working for the dredging of the common rivers. And it has 2 benefits. One is, of course, the maintenance of the navigability of the rivers, which helps the connectivity for the transportation of goods, which is one of the most environment-friendly and the most cost-effective means of transportation of bulk goods. So we are working for navigability, but also dredging of the rivers contributes to maintaining the ecology, the health of the rivers, and maintaining the fragile ecosystem of the riverine ecosystem. Honorable Foreign Minister mentioned that Bangladesh has always called for a basin-wide approach for maintenance to work of the rivers. And as we try to enhance our collaboration with India on riverine connectivity, which also will extend to include Bhutan, because already Bhutan is using some of the Brahmaputra for some transportation of goods, which they want to extend. Nepal also wants to join in this initiative because of its cost effectiveness. So then maintenance of the rivers, the flow of the rivers, as well as the navigability of the rivers becomes a matter of critical importance. Similarly, global warming and the climate change is providing a double whammy for Bangladesh because, and also for the Himalayan countries, because Bangladesh wants to reduce carbon emission, but we also need power to power our high growth economy. But we are decommissioning our coal-based power plants. So one of the good options for us would be to develop hydropower cooperation with Nepal, Bhutan, and northeastern India. With India, we already have a collaboration in place. We are importing around 1,100 megawatt electricity from India, but of course it's not all hydro. But with Nepal and Bhutan, their options are there, and the benefits, the potential is immense because in Nepal alone, they have the capability of economically producing around 60,000 megawatt. And it is the source of green, clean, renewable energy. Unfortunately, the global warming is causing the glaciers to melt. And I don't know what sort of impact that will have on the glacial rivers, on the Himalayan rivers, and whether that will have an impact on the hydropower potential of Nepal. There was a study by, again, ICIMOD that over the next 50 years, the Himalayas will become wetter they will get more rainfall. I mean, the ice capping may not be there, but they will be getting more rainfall. So they are saying that the hydro potential will still be there. But then how to do we prepare, or do we have reservoirs to collect this extra water? If we have reservoirs uphill in Nepal, will it have an impact on their ecology and biodiversity, on their livelihoods, on the people in Nepal? How do you balance? That water is critically important for the dry season river flows in Bangladesh. So there needs to be a delicate balance between the two, the need to to preserve the water and the need to maintain the water flow of the rivers. And here, Nepal and Bhutan and also India will have to, think out of the box and think, undiplomatically, and create a mechanism which will be a win-win situation. Because it's important, it's critically important if we want to move away from the carbon-based power generation system and move into greener and cleaner sources of energy. Another point that I wanted to mention here, Bangladesh on its own has been doing a lot of, taken a lot of initiatives that Honorable Foreign Minister mentioned. Similarly, all the countries of the region have been taking a lot of initiatives. But where do we, get together, and where do we connect the dots of these national action plans and the strategic action plans and the sustainable goals? So we need regional frameworks. So a lot of work was being done under the SARC, Environment Ministerial track, also the SARC Agricultural Ministers track. Similarly, in BIMSTEC also, there is a BIMSTEC Center for Climate Change and Biodiversity, which is hosted in Bhutan. And also there is a climate change track sector where Bangladesh is the lead country. So regionally, these mechanisms will have to be made more energized and more robust if we want to connect the countries of the Eastern Himalayas and not just talk about collaboration. One last point that I wanted to make, there are other regional initiatives like the Coalition for Disaster Resilient initiative that India has taken up in 2019. It was launched by Sri Narendra Modi in September 2019. Bangladesh joined this coalition last year, and it is indeed a very important coalition for getting together local techniques, technologies, businesses, and policymakers together. There are several other initiatives that Bangladesh and India are working together. But I particularly feel that ecology, there is, as our countries are growing faster and developing, and the challenges are growing, the challenges of the fuel crisis, the food security crisis, and the debt crisis, as the challenges are growing, we have all come to realize that, COVID particularly taught us that we must have greater collaboration within the region, because when the supply chains were disrupted, it was the neighbors which extended the helping hand. Bangladesh, India, Nepal, we all extended help to each other. And so at times of looming climate change crisis, looming crisis, multiple crises that are emerging, there can be no alternative but to collaborate and work together, because our survival is at stake. Sea level 1.5 degrees temperature will see large parts of Bangladesh inundated, and 2 crore people will be left homeless. Where will these people go? Global warming, 1 degree global warming will lead to the glaciers disappearing from the Himalayas, the third pole, as they like to call it. So once the glaciers disappear, what will we be left with? We will be left with a desert. So there is no alternative but for collaboration and diplomatic efforts. So I would like to end here now. Thank you all for your attention. Joy Bangla.
My enormous pleasure in introducing and inviting His Excellency Mr. Gautam Mukhopadhyay, the former ambassador from the External Affairs Ministry in India. Please.
Thank you, Professor Imtiaz Hussain. Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Namaste. First of all, my thanks very much to the Balipara Foundation, to the Independent University of Bangladesh, and the various departments, the Center of Bay of Bengal, the Center for Global Governance, and so on, for firstly organizing and hosting this conference, and also inviting me to this particular session on ecological diplomacy. Let me start with a couple of small demerits. I retired from the Foreign Service about 6 years back, and I'm much more focused on local grassroots work. But it's also a welcome throwback to my earlier days as a diplomat, to go beyond the local and to look at the sort of regional diplomacy, regional ecological diplomacy that we wish to start around this theme of climate change and so on. I think the pressing need for cooperation is something that we have all felt in the course of the last 1.5 days. And one of the lessons that are very obviously apparent from what we have been hearing in the last 2 days is the sheer interconnectivity of everything. In other words, one has to begin from the whole and one has to reach the whole. One cannot address any issue compartmentally at all. Everything is related. And just as we cannot separate the Himalayas from the Bay of Bengal and the Brahmaputra Plains and Bangladesh and the Podda and all the human activity which Professor Imtiaz also sort of listed in the course of that. In many ways, we can't even separate even this region from the wider region. And, and I think that brings us to the heart of this whole issue of what diplomacy entails, which is eventually, immediate interests and also power politics. And the same Himalayas that we talk about in the context of the Eastern Himalayas is part of a much larger ecological and geopolitical context. From the Himalayas alone, extended this way or that way, practically every major river system of at least the southern half of Asia originates. From the Indus, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, the Podda, and if you go further, the Irrawaddy, the Salween, or Thanlin as it is called, the Mekong, and really right down to the eastern rivers, the Da River and the Red River leading through Vietnam into what is now called the Indo-Pacific and the South China Sea. So in many ways, this Himalayas that we are talking about are central in many ways to the environmental health of the region and the much wider region in which we are situated, but also the whole issue of climate change. And Madam Mashfi Shams, I want to thank you for the emphasis that you also put on the whole issue of glaciers and glacial melt, because water scarcity is going to be the single thing that is really going to be sort of pressing on us. And then when we come to water, we come to this whole issue of not just environment, but also politics. And my mention of the Himalayas and the Himalayas being shared by the various countries of the region, the fact that in many ways the headwaters of all the waters leading southwards from the Himalayas and eastwards from the Himalayas lie effectively in China. So, any kind of solution that we need to bring in China into that. And again, if we look at the overall sort of panorama, ecological diplomacy is in its infancy. I salute, in fact, in many ways, the national action plans that countries like Bangladesh have taken, and also the leadership in climate diplomacy that Bangladesh has taken, which was sort of beautifully listed by the Foreign Minister of Bangladesh, His Excellency Mr. Abdul Momen, just a short while back. So I don't need to repeat that. And I think this was also elaborated by Madam Mashri Shams. I think it is there is a kind of political will that we are seeing in particularly in Bangladesh, I would say, but the sense of urgency that yesterday was sort of underlined, by Sir Nicholas Stern, I think that is still missing. We are happy that we have, MOUs on the Sundarbans, on tigers, on elephants. We have trans-boundary cooperation on national parks like the Manas, also with Bhutan. We have some trilateral and some regional mechanisms that address many of the issues of wildlife and forests and rivers. Bilateral agreements that we have, like the Indus Water Commission, as well as the agreements that we have with Bangladesh. But actually, all that really adds up to very little in terms of the urgency with which we need to address this system. And this urgency is not limited to bilateral or regional issues. I mean, if we just look at the Eastern Himalayan states of India, I don't see that we have the mechanisms to bring together all the states of the Northeast region to discuss issues of climate change and environmental risks and environmental disasters and disaster risk management, even within the northeastern states of India. I'm not even sure to what degree such an urgency exists in the states of India, because actually everywhere you go, even at the local level, you are seeing the kind of confrontation almost between environmental needs and developmental needs. And I think in many ways we need to address this as much from the top down through global policy, through regional cooperation, as much as from the bottom up. Because it's eventually these bottom up solutions that are going to radiate out and become the norm in terms of both interstate cooperation within countries of the region, as well as inter-country cooperation in this area. And so, there are sort of many issues that come up in that context, which is, first of all, I think we need to enlarge the institutions that are going to deal with diplomacy, with ecological diplomacy as well. In fact, there is some requirement to establish ecological diplomacy as almost as important as political diplomacy, as well as, let's say, economic diplomacy that we have. So in many ways, our institutions dealing with diplomacy, such as our foreign ministries and the ministries of environment and forests in all our countries, need to sort of synthesize their efforts and establish the kind of institutions that will form the platform for bilateral, regional, and international diplomacy, which we are seeing in multilateral institutions, but they haven't quite filtered down to the regional and bilateral levels. Along with the institutions, I think we need the leadership. We need the leadership of the states concerned and the regions concerned also to be involved in this, because these are the local inputs that we would need to bring. Actually, those kind of institutions are simply not there. They are not there at the national level. They are not there at the level of the states and the regions. And I think all this has to be supplemented. And a point that was made yesterday, which I found very persuasive, which is, yesterday we sort of witnessed this very healthy and I would say interesting debate between the rationality, the economic rationality of Ecology's economy, as well as the issue of values. And the need to sort of restore values along with rationality. And the values that, of course, we are talking about are the values of nature, along with rationality into virtually all levels, starting with the primary education level to higher education levels. In other words, a kind of ecological literacy that we need to build in together with our, whatever development strategies that we need to, bring into that. So, and one of the things that I think we also kind of missed out in the last couple of days was also the importance of the Bay of Bengal. By and large, we've discussed the Bay of Bengal in terms of saltwater ingress into the delta and the kind of tensions that take place between the river systems and the saline maritime systems. But in many ways, I think as one of the points that 5 points that you listed, the oceans are also, and the Bay of Bengal is also likely to become part of a much larger problem of climate change and environmental impacts, particularly from plastics. And this again was discussed yesterday. So briefly, if I can just quickly sort of sum up what I meant to say, was that one is that it is very important. There is no question that in the long run, we have to move to a much more basin-wide approach. We have to begin from the top, from the Himalayas, from ecologically sustainable and locally rooted afforestation programs, respecting the local biodiversity, restoring degraded lands and restoring degraded forests. Along with that, restoring wetlands, restoring grasslands where they are necessary, the entire sort of, all the sort of environmental spaces that go along with that. And at the same time, start working from the other side, which is to see that start working from the small farms that face the pressures of environment, from the livelihoods that are not available from nature-based sort of economic systems, and who instead then tend to plunder the environment for livelihoods. So there are triple pressures. There are pressures that come from development projects that are environmentally destructive and contribute to loss of biodiversity and climate change. There are commercial interests that, in fact, add to that and amplify that much worse, and in fact, compound that incredibly. And then, of course, livelihood pressures. And we need to address these three levels. That is the policy level, at the development, on development, the commercial level, which often tends to take precedence, and the livelihood levels, which are pressing ultimately. And until we find solutions for livelihood that are respectful of the environment and can mitigate and prevent, or at least also help adaptation in climate change, the rest of it will not occur. And many of the problems that we talk about, where we have conflicts on river waters or disputes on river waters, ultimately come down to livelihood issues on this side of, or that side of the border, which then get amplified in diplomacy and the politics between countries. So there is no other way but cooperation that is mindful of livelihood realities and the politics of the region. And in many ways, the solutions have to begin as much from politics as from livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Gautam. And in fact, your discussion of the expansion of diplomacy, that is precisely one of the reasons why Independent University Bangladesh introduced the Global Studies and Governance program, from where you see many faculty and students right here. We are at our Cinderella time, so basically we should be stopping any minute now, but I would like to open up for any comments or questions you might have among yourselves. And there's a microphone right in front of you, just in case.
Sorry, just to...
Oh.
Is it working? Yeah, okay, thank you. No, just to set the ball rolling, if anything, as I said, we are discussing the Eastern Himalayan within a somewhat wider region. And that wider region is in many ways united by its natural features, the mountains, the rivers, the forests, and so on. I think at some point or the other, we need to, particularly because the Himalayas play such an important role, particularly in the water systems of the region, that I think some solution that brings all the Himalayan states, particularly I would say in this case China, which sits at the headwaters of virtually all the river systems, is something that I think we need to address at some point or the other.
Ambassador Mashfi.
Thank you very much. I think the discussion, I would like to thank Ambassador Gautam for making such an important point of ecological diplomacy. Far too long, ecology, environment, we have left this into the hands of the experts and not actually to the hands of, the real people for whom we are supposed to be working for, the real people whose lives will be affected, the person who will become, homeless because of soil erosion or because of the encroachment of the waters from the sea level rise or because of desertification. So it's time that we brought in more discussion among the people of the region. This is one point that I wanted to make, and one point that I missed about cross-border choke points, the trading choke points and plastic, as our chair mentioned. I just wanted to point out about the issue of the border huts. One of the very innovative ideas that brought communities together of the remote areas who do not have access to the bigger markets. So people of the two remote communities across the border of Bangladesh and India, they are doing some local business with some local commodities. And it's worked very well. In fact, it has become so successful that now even the less remote communities want to replicate this concept. But I think increasing the capacity of the local communities across the border might sort of help to decongest the choke points of our, the checkposts. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We don't always get two of the top policymakers for us from two different countries all the. So I think Cinderella is willing to be punished today. I'll overstep my time and open up for any questions, comments, one or two of them, to a very vibrant, I think, audience that you have been for 2 days. Think it over. Think about your locality, how that is being affected by policies we are making.
Thank you. I am Shucheta from Brack University, and I'm happy to attend this event. As the speakers have repeatedly talked about, one important point was always about water. And there are rumors even that the Fourth World War is going to be over water. It's going to be because of water. So my question is that water is the biggest part of ecology, and yet the developing countries like Bangladesh and India, we focus on our development, making roads, bridges, and other ways of transportation, which cannot be very good for the ecology, can it? For an example, in my hometown, there's an area called Nikli Haud. It's a big wetland, and it's a big part of our ecology and the entire natural habitat. It's a big natural habitat for many river dolphins and everything. But recently, I have visited that place after 4 or 5 years, and I was shocked to see that only roads and bridges were being built, and there were no more river dolphins in sight. I could see them when I was a child, I could see them every day. But there are no more river dolphins in sight anymore. So, can we not build some transportation policies or making alternative transportation ways of transportation like ropeways or ferries, things like that, instead of building roads and bridges everywhere? Thank you.
Thank you. Would any of you like to say something?
No, thank you. It's a very important point that you mentioned. No, Bangladesh is working very closely with India and, as I mentioned, Bhutan and Nepal. India also unveiled the integrated water transportation, I think, earlier this year, integrated water transportation system or initiative. I think it was launched with a lot of, they also invited our Minister for Shipping and a lot of people. So integrated water management and transportation is being considered. And as I mentioned, it is the most economically viable and the cost-effective means of transport and the most ecologically helpful. So we are working not as fast as we should be, but definitely the riverways. And as I mentioned, a lot of the rivers are being, a lot of dredging is taking place, and that helps the navigability and also maintain the health of the rivers. So I think that way some of the collaboration is going on, but yes, there is need to more urgent need for greater collaboration in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Can I just also add a little bit to it? Well, thank you firstly for, I think, flagging the issue of wetlands. But I think the general problem that you've outlined is the kind of, the challenges faced by the needs for protection, conservation of the environment, and the pressures of development. And we are seeing this every day. I mean, it was just about 3 or 4 months back that a railway line that is being constructed from Silchar to Imphal, and it is really a very important project for the people of Manipur, because it's perhaps the best form of connectivity that you can establish there. Every couple of years, there are instances of disasters involving landslides, mudslides, and all kinds of other impacts on the environment. But one of the sort of things that I really underlined was the importance of the Himalayas, the importance of forests. Because in a way, all the water supply system begins from there, and they are retained through the extensive plantation of what used to be the forests of the region. So I think that's one. The second thing is that as far as the area of wetlands is concerned, it's also an area that is under great stress. Everywhere, urban pressures are ending up, basically taking over all the wetlands. And in the last few years, we have seen enormous floods in places like Mumbai, in places like Chennai, very recently in Bangalore. Any moment this could affect any of the towns of the northeast of India. I mean, I suspect that Guwahati will be the next. Bogirbil, which was a wetland just outside that, is increasingly getting, urbanized. And about 1/3 of the world's wetlands have been lost just in the last, 3 or 4 decades. So I think the point that you have underlined is really, really important. In fact, it's actually necessary to protect every form of, of lands, wetlands or grasslands or forest lands or river systems. And in many ways, as far as the river systems are concerned, they begin from the upper reaches, from the Himalayas, and trees are central to its conservation.
I underscore the point that Ambassador Gautam is making, and that is you've hit the central point of the whole conference. How do we shift from economics to the ecology? Would you, each one of you, pay less attention to your bank account than your water tank in your house? The chances that pretty soon you might. If we turn the water off, then you might. And with 90% of the Himalayan waters coming into the Bay of Bengal and 77% of the drainage system of the entire Himalayas being right here, there is something we have to start thinking about if that water tap is turned off.
Excuse me, one more question.
One more
time for-
question very quickly, please. Yes, sir, please.
See, while we're talking about ecosystems,
We can barely hear you.
when we're talking about ecosystem, I'm Ranjit. When we're talking about ecosystem, an ancillary point to the points that have been made is the valuation. And one area which the river provides is the protein security of this region. The protein security, the fish. So what actually we've missed somewhere in the point that even if you don't say valuing nature as part of your economic budget every year, surely the chief ministers and the prime minister of this country should address the health issues around protein security by actually taking fish as a very good example of providing the protein security.
Would either of you?
Ranjit, thank you. Thank you. You focus specifically on protein security, but you also sort of brought in this issue of natural asset valuation. And, a question that has been on my mind right since Sir Partho's talk yesterday has been, how do we move? I mean, what are the metrics? How can we know that we are actually moving from a system in which nature is simply not valued? If anything, it's almost treated as kabaddi, to something in which nature is actually valued. And I wonder, and this is a question that I'd actually throw back to the audience, is can we visualize a day when a plot of land is not just brought for the value of the market value of the land in terms of property, but also for the natural assets that it already contains. That means, let's say a plot of land, an acre of land that has 300 trees would be valued very differently from an acre of land that has no trees. What is the natural asset valuation of those 300 trees in that acre and all the life systems and what you call ecosystem services that it supports?
Completely.
If we can go to that, then we know we are moving from a kind of economy in which nature is treated as inert to an economy in which nature has a certain value.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
the point that Ambassador Shyam Saran made yesterday, the difference between price and value,
Yes.
should show up.
No, that's absolutely right. But I still come back and want to emphasize the health security of the region, and therefore how water and the rivers provide the health security. And I'm only specifically focusing on the fish security, given that it's such a delicacy, it's such an important part of our lives. So the valuation of that, as somebody told me a few years ago, the fish in the river has no value. The moment you fish it out, it has a lot of value. So you can do the valuation. Anyway, I think this is for part of our sort of findings. We need to take this up very seriously, especially the valuation, as we've been talking in the last few days. We've been privileged to have Sir Partha with us to actually lead this deliberation, and I'm grateful to him for having sparked this off, because at least I know now there's a buzz about this word. Now we need to actualize it. Thank you all very much.
Would you have any comment on that?
Thank you. Of course, protein security for Bangladesh, we consider fish to be a vegetable, It's so much a part of our diet because I lived in two vegetarian countries for a long time, India and Nepal. So when I used to serve fish, I used to tell them that we Bengalis consider fish to be a vegetable and don't think that it's protein. But yes, Bangladesh has been, doing wonders in terms of fish production. I think now we are the third largest freshwater fish producing country in the world. But it's all coming at, it comes with a price. But nutrition and health security and food security are critically important. On rivers and wetlands, I think in Bangladesh, we habitually have the habit of encroaching on our rivers and wetlands and forget cross-border cooperation. First of all, we need to preserve, we need to safeguard our own rivers. The 4 rivers encircling Dhaka. Saving those rivers has become a major challenge because of the land grabbers. And, so I think it's all interconnected. And until we realize how much we are losing, I mean, what are the costs of losing this river by encroaching on it? We may think that by encroaching on the river, I am gaining, 1,000, 10,000 taka per square meter. But the overall cost of losing that river, we need to take that into consideration. Until we start a debate on that, I think we will be continuing to, we will be continuing to lose our rivers and wetlands. And so, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Basically, shrimp is very good for health. Doctors recommend it. And it's so good that we are selling $350 million every year of it by producing it in the southwestern districts. Every day that we cultivate shrimp, we are dumping 15 tons of trash. Now, it's a trade-off, which way you want to go. I remember in the 1970s, just after liberation, 74, 75, we had a famine. 75 million people had a famine. We didn't have enough food. Today, 170 million are not only self-sufficient, but during my time, 1970s, the average height of a Bengali was 5.3, 5 feet 3 inches, my height. Today, they are much taller. So tell me that health is a problem. I think it has been a huge wonder for the country. Sure, there are problems, but we have to grapple with them one by one. And again, going back to the previous question, keep an eye on the bank account. Can we afford to do it or not? I don't know if the organizers are going to kick us out but I think it's a fine time to bring this session to an end here. There's a lot more to be done, and I think we should proceed accordingly. Thank you ever so much, especially our 2 distinguished guests. Please give them a nice hand. You tell them?
Okay, yeah.
Yes. Then tell them.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So thank you very much, dear panelists, our respectable dignitaries, for your precious message and speech. So I'd like to request all of our dignitaries to get back to your seats, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, sir. So thank you very much, everyone, for your patience and time. And now, at the end of this panel discussion, we're going to have one recorded session from Mr. N. Ganapathy Subramaniam, who's the Chief Operating Officer, Tata Consultancy Services. So may I request our tech team to play the recorded message? Thank you.
If you really look at the Tata Group's philosophy, and the founding fathers have said that what comes from people should go back to the people many times over, right? So, and the community is the very purpose of our business, right? Yeah. And when you look at that, Mother Nature is an integral part of it, because the whole objective of living with nature, coexisting with nature, and making sure that people have a long-term perspective, right, to doing business. And if certain area of our country belongs to certain people, certain communities, they are the owners of that land. They are the owners of that flora, fauna, and they take care of that. They have taken care of that for so long, and you don't have the right to go and do what you want just because you own now a piece of that land, right? So you got to preserve and integrate yourself with the rest of the community, rest of the area in which you do. And you have to do that pretty much unconditionally. I think, that has been the philosophy of the group. How are we meeting our present needs? Are we doing the right thing? Do we have the right to consume everything that we have and which is available in either in abundance or in scarcity? Correct. Without leaving anything for the future generation. Right? I think that's the fundamental question. I think that's the fundamental question that youngsters of today are also asking. Yes. Now, rightfully, the priorities were different. Are we meeting our present needs in a way that it is regenerative, it is circular, and it is sustainable, right? I think, and also, don't take anything more than what you need, and at the same time, make sure that it replenishes, right? I mean, that's the key mantra that at least that has been my realization over the last about 10, 15 years. And that's what is driving our own agenda internally in TCS.
Thank you very much, Mr. N. Ganapathy Subramaniam, the Chief Operating Officer of Tata Consultancy Services, for his valuable message.